this week's video, I had the privilege of interviewing my younger brother Daniel on the concept of beauty, something that he has studied at a fairly high level, and so was excited to pick his brain about it. He dropped into our online service at Canvas Church last week to discuss it a little bit, and if you want to check that out, then the link is going to be in the description of this video. But in part one of our discussion today, we talk about how Darwinism struggles to explain what beauty is, and how beauty is an aesthetics and appreciation for all of that is really a uniquely human thing. And then we also get into how the biblical worldview dives into all of that as well. And so you're going to enjoy this video. Make sure to check out the links in the video description for more resources on this subject. So here's our discussion, part one. Well, hey, and I'm excited to have my brother Daniel joining me for this midweek video. You may have caught him at our online service this past Sunday. Brought him in as the beauty expert. Aesthetics and Christianity and the arts and all of that stuff is his area of study. And brought him in on Sunday, and so interesting stuff that you shared that I wanted to do a follow-up interview where we could take a little bit more time to dive deep into some of that stuff. So Daniel, welcome to this, I
Yeah.
guess the Canvas Oak Bay YouTube channel.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Thanks, Cam, for letting me double dip, crash the service on Sunday, make fun of my brother, share some thought, and then to be able to discuss it kind of more long form is great.
Yeah, and so you wrote your dissertation on specifically sublime literature and how that ultimately that points to God and it gives trouble to some other Darwinistic explanations and stuff. But more so than just literature, you really got a passion for the arts and culture and all that stuff, and really how Christianity as a worldview intersects with all of that stuff. And so I'll link your website, thecollision.org, into the description of this video. But maybe just give a 5-second intro of what do you do on your website that people can go check out.
Yeah. We do movie reviews, different articles. We have a YouTube channel. We're launching a podcast, but basically, we're just looking at kind of pop culture and Christianity, and then how do those collide and intersect, and how do we kind of engage the culture as Christians, navigating media and the arts and stuff. And so, yeah, it's fun. We'd love to have you guys join us, become a collider, sort of join what we're doing as we're breaking it down each week, just saying, what has God called us to do in this culture that Christ sent us and commissioned us to go into.
Totally, and so good the way you guys unpack how Christianity intersects with popular culture, and I would especially recommend it if you are a teenager or a young adult, or if you have teenagers or young adults. It's a great way to get them to interact with a lot of the pop culture stuff that we're kind of swimming in. It's sort of the water that we're swimming in, but sometimes when you're surrounded by it, it's hard to take time to really think through it when you're just kind of experiencing it. And so yeah, I love what you guys are doing. And I want to chat a little bit about really the specifics of beauty, not necessarily cosmetic beauty of I'm sure you could also do a talk on that, how to beautify yourself.
That's my other YouTube channel. I do that
Yeah.
too.
But more specifically, maybe in a theological or philosophical sense, beauty as a concept. And maybe to kick things off, what I find interesting that you get into in your dissertation is how Darwinism and evolution actually has a hard time explaining really what beauty is, why it's important, where it came from. And so this was a problem even for Darwin himself, and then for all of those who have come after him, have had a difficult time explaining beauty through the lens of Darwinism. And so why don't you unpack that a little bit for us? What's the problem with that? What was Darwin's problem with beauty?
Yeah. Well, this beauty itself is such like a fundamental reality of human and even animal existence that really any worldview, any kind of belief system has to at some point account for what it is. This is something that's so crucial in ways we recognize and ways we sort of overlook. So again, Darwinism, even though, well, it's focused maybe more on like biology and stuff, at some point, Darwin had to face the question of beauty. What is beauty? He acknowledged it in his book, The Origin of Species, ends kind of his famous quote saying, "And this form's most beautiful." Kind of his final conclusion of his whole theory of evolution is just that it was beautiful. But the theory itself of how does beauty fit into his kind of evolutionary theories actually were, in his own opinion, one of the hardest problems for him to deal with. And there's a famous quote that gets thrown around sometimes in a letter he wrote to one of his colleagues, where he says, "The sight of a feather in a peacock's tail, whenever I gaze at it, makes me sick." And he was talking to another scientist, and in that same letter, he'd kind of said, "Hey, like I remember I used to stress out and lose sleep over the eyeball. How could that evolve? And but really now, what troubles me is beauty." And it's because his whole theory of evolution is based on the idea that of kind of practicality, kind of utility, whatever kind of trait or adaptation or mutation, whatever helps us, a species survive, the rigors of survival of the fittest. Helps them reproduce, helps them find the food that will be passed on, and over time, any kind of traits that don't help that or that hinder that, those species with those traits will all die off because they're losing the battle. But then he looked at something like beauty and saying, a peacock's tail feathers, these bright colors, it's like a Las Vegas sign. It's saying, this the
Eat me.
anti-camouflage, like you're not hiding from a tiger very well or something with, throwing that up. So he had to wrestle with that, saying, how can in a theory that's so based on just things that help survival, why is so much of nature seems to be driven by this aesthetics and this sort of pursuit of beauty? And again, he wrestled with that really to the end of his life.
And what's interesting about that too is that, I know sometimes in Darwinism, you'll say some things help you to survive. They give you an advantage, and then there's other things that maybe they don't give you an advantage, but they don't really give you a disadvantage either. And so it might just hang on. It might just sort of still be there because it doesn't hinder you from surviving. But you look at something like the peacock's tail, and you sort of think like that that seems to would be a hindrance, like a big advertisement to predators, unless you get into maybe the theory of sexual selection, where I know you talk some about this too, where maybe these peacock feathers, they advertise yourself to tigers, but they also advertise yourself to female peacocks, and if they think that those feathers are beautiful and they're attracted to you, then maybe you'll procreate and pass on your legacy before the tiger comes to eat you, and thus survive. But it seems a little much, right?
Yeah, and that's sort of the thing is, it's one thing to just say, beauty today doesn't help us, survive, but back then would it? And could it just sort of piggyback on other traits? And that was kind of the most common right after Darwin published. He had a bunch of pushback for his theories on kind of where beauty came from. And one of the most popular was to try and just say, beautiful traits are things that are connected to health. So even though those traits might not in themselves, help you to survive, help a species, that they're connected, they're signs of health, and that's why those get passed on. But again, the peacock was sort of his one, but there's a bird species that it attracts mates with its wings, and it has like hollow wing bone, so it can flap the wings really fast and make this music that apparently the female birds in that species they're all about those songs. But it actually gets hindered, like the bird doesn't fly well because the bones
Oh.
are structured in a way to, so someone like Darwin or people trying to attach some of the Darwin, like Wallace, who co-wrote it with him, had this approach, saying this is actually, if you try and kind of connect it to health, you actually see a lot of signs in nature where beauty is almost at the expense of health,
Hmm.
or at the expense of even kind of secondary virtues or values in a Darwinian world kind of worldview system.
So there's some interesting examples of what might look like beauty and aesthetics in the animal kingdom. you might hear birds singing, and it sounds very musical, or those sorts of things. But in a lot of ways, it seems as though beauty, the recognition of beauty in and of itself, rather than just the female peacock being attracted to the beautiful male peacock, there's an attraction there for a purpose, but not necessarily the female peacock just standing back and going, wow, I appreciate this beauty for just being beautiful. And in fact, I'm going to go and create beauty of my own, inspired by the beauty that I've seen. That seems to be just a human thing, a uniquely human thing, and yet I know that's kind of debated in the in the conversation, because of a few examples that come to my mind. One being the famous elephants that paint and paint self-portraits. I know there's also birds that sing, and birds that collect blue colored things for their nests and all this stuff. And so maybe dive into that for a minute and explain your view on why beauty seems to be more of a uniquely human thing, and what's the difference between the way humans approach beauty and aesthetics and maybe the way that animals seem to approach it, other animals.
Yeah, 'cause that's, there's really like, with beauty and aesthetics, there's kind of two tracks. You have the this sort of physical aesthetics, which humans share with animals. Animals seem to show that they value bright colored tail feathers. They value color in females of the species rather than no colors. But sort of the second track of just sort of creating beauty that goes beyond just sort of a trait in yourself. Like the peacock's tail feather is beautiful, but it didn't create that. It's not
Hmm.
it's not a work of art in any way. But the
It's
the
like
kind of
us, right? We're like, we're beautiful,
yeah.
but I had nothing to do with this.
Yeah, some might say we're that they would classify us as a work of art,
Work
but
of art, a
uh,
masterpiece,
yeah,
Da
but
Vinci-esque.
that's kind of what I get into with the dissertation too, with the literature, is that if you are coming at it from like a Darwinian perspective, another besides this sort of why do animals value beauty as opposed to just pure survival, is why have only humans kind of evolved or grown to create art. You don't have museums of zebras and camels and stuff. It's only humans that do that. Kind of why is that? Again, there's, if you said it's being debated, you said like the famous elephant, which quite frankly probably paints or makes pictures that people would be more willing to buy than anything that me or you did. And again, if you guys aren't, this is actually a book on that. Siri the elephant. It's at the Syracuse Zoo, still alive. I follow an elephant on Facebook. Keep up
So
with it.
I have a question. Is Siri from the iPhone named after Siri the elephant, or is that just a coincidence?
I think it's just a coincidence.
Because those are
Uh,
the only two series that I've ever heard of.
yeah,
I didn't know if there was a connection.
yeah, I don't think so. But yeah, if you Google it, it's sort of a sensational. You have these videos of these elephants painting self-portraits of things that are clearly recognizable as elephants. And
Hmm.
again, when that sort of started coming out, people were, there were a bunch of kind of attention clickbaity headlines about, you know, art is no longer the sole domain of humans. It's animals are doing art. And that really started with Syria, which was this, she was playing with a stick in the dirt, and her trainer saw that and said, that's art. She's expressing herself, and took the stick out and gave her like a pencil and some paper, and then eventually a paint. And Siri does that. And again, it wasn't done in some horrible motive. The trainer just thought it was. And this book kind of shares about that.
And what she
Um,
started off doing was more just kind of abstract stuff, right? Like what she
yeah,
started doing wasn't really recognizable.
it's funny
It was
because like
beautiful, but
um, it's I don't know how well you'll be able to see the lines in there. It's this minimalist sort of pencil scribbles, but they actually the trainer sent this to a bunch of like art critics without saying who it was, famous world-renowned artists. And without knowing it was an elephant, they gave this glowing praise. And they saw in all this symbolism, or all this light touch of the brush. And very applying kind of human kind of motives and inspiration uh, to the elephant. The reality with that though is
Well, and it's
um,
interesting, the blind spots that people can even have. You know, I think of those who submitted to academic peer-reviewed journal and just filled it with a bunch of
yeah,
postmodern jargon words that literally meant nothing. And their article was actually accepted into a peer-reviewed journal. And they said this article doesn't even mean anything. All we did was fill it with all the jargon nonsense words of a postmodern worldview. And and people saw what they wanted to see. And kind of sounds almost similar in the same way
yeah,
to
because
that. Like
even
if you're
like those
looking
self
for it.
portraits, the self portraits are the more attention grabbing. There's actually like an art academy for elephants, where elephants go and they train to be artists. And really that's what it is though, it's training. And if you kind of follow the step by step for them to do, and it's more equivalent to like a chimpanzee learning to sign, or even like a dog learning to sit. It's more advanced than that. Elephants are smarter probably than dogs or some of those species. But the elephant paints one portrait, and they're taught step by step to do so, and they'll only paint that portrait for the rest of their life, and they'll get a reward for doing so. And even like the scribbles, we see that as art because we are humans and we create art. That's what we know. And you kind of find that we're actually kind of imposing our own meaning and stuff, interpretation to the into what these elephants are doing, that the elephant themselves is not, they don't have any concept that they're making art. They'll actually just keep Siri will just keep moving her brush back and forth until it's just all black. Only it only looks like art because the trainer sneaks in and pulls it away at a time when it still looks like something that might be a work of beauty. But really, and again, bird song is another example that is really more a communication device. It just sounds better than like a goat or a frog, so we think it's more musical to our ears. But it's the same function as any other animal species. But it's really the only reason we can see art in kind of the creation of beauty is because we ourselves have a concept and awareness of the value of making beauty that is unique in the whole animal kingdom.
So in one sense, it's almost like a circus act, where you don't have elephants that just walk in and start balancing on big balls or something. You have to teach them to do these things, and they maybe show a certain amount of good memory or trunk dexterity or something, and then you kind of take that stuff and train them to do things, which I guess in one sense.
Yeah, and they'll never experiment with a new style or new movement, impressionism or surrealism, or or I'm going to try and add a different background. You're getting like almost a photocopy. It's a trained action. But again, this is really, if that too is the most the best case for kind of animals also creating art, then it really goes to show just how unique kind of art and man-made beauty is in nature and society, and how exclusive to our own species that is.
It's interesting because, we as humans, we have to learn how to do that stuff too. We train. Your wife went to art school, to train to hone her skills and stuff. But what you don't see in the animal kingdom is a sense of desire to express themselves through art and experiment and be inspired by things. I think you've even mentioned before about how the elephant, it doesn't even know when the painting's really finished. It just kind of does its thing, and then the
Yeah,
the, the trainer will take it away when they think it's finished. But and they're also the elephants just sort of paint the same thing over and over, right? They paint the self portrait, and they can just make copies of the same thing that they've learned how to make, but they don't necessarily have a sense of experimentation or I just have to create other things. It's probably mostly just fun for them. Just amusing.
yeah. And if you hang if you hang one of their elephant artworks on the wall of their cage, their habitat, they'll never go back and look at
They
it.
don't
They
care
don't,
about it.
there's no value to it. And there's even been scientific studies, again, it's still not a whole lot of data, that the experience of these art academies actually is not a positive emotion for it actually adds stress, and it's not
Huh.
this release that you kind of want. The narrative of this art, this elephant's expressing that, it's actually there's been kind of pushback and activism almost against that, saying you're forcing actions and stuff that aren't natural to this species, and it's actually doing worse for its own kind of well-being than just letting it be an elephant and do whatever an elephant does.
Yeah, and that seems to be such a big part of even what art is the appreciation aspect of it, being able to stand back and to acknowledge this thing is beautiful. Something about this thing is beautiful, which just seems uniquely human. Well, and how does that fit within a biblical worldview? Because if Darwinism struggles to explain art and its value, what about the biblical worldview? How does that look at things differently and explain the whole phenomenon differently?
Yeah, and that's kind of none of these, the fact that we have poetry today doesn't necessarily therefore Darwinism is wrong and the biblical worldview is correct. It's not some slam dunk thing, but if you just look at, if you have to fit beauty, sort of an explanation for beauty, into a worldview, it's difficult, if not impossible, for a Darwinist. And there's multiple books with different theories trying to, even published within the last year, just still trying to do it like 150 years after Darwin died, and they still haven't kind of come up with anything convincing enough to end the discussion. Where if you contrast that with kind of a biblical worldview, again, I got into a bit of this when I was in the sermon on Sunday. But if you start from the basis that we are created, in a way we are a work of art ourselves, by a God that is a creator, that we're made in his image, that he sort of is a standard for beauty. You can compare sort of what beauty is based on a notion of kind of what God is and what his intended design is. That all the kind of theories and explanations for beauty fits. It fits with anything you read in scripture. God, equipping artists, valuing art, valuing representational beauty that points towards him. That if you're just sort of trying to find a place to fit beauty in, the biblical worldview kind of seamlessly offers explanations to all the realities that you see just by looking at nature.
Hey, like I mentioned at the beginning, if you want some more resources to check out that dive into this topic further, you can look at the links in the description of this video, and make sure to tune in next week for part 2 as we ask the question, what does the concept of beauty look like for Christian apologetics? How can we use that to engage more effectively with the culture all around us? And so, thanks, Canvas Church. Thanks for tuning in. Make sure to join us for part 2 next week.